got some provoking questions.
I will.
Scott. Now, Scott keeps telling me that he's the only non-traditional eco person, as in he is the only traditional business on our screen today, which I don't totally agree with, but I think he's a great example of someone who comes from a traditional background, has seen the light and made choices around the way he's built businesses. So Scott comes from a plastics background and has chosen to shift his factories from more traditional plastics to fully compostable plastics. And it's a great story as he's inching his way into the supermarkets around Australia. So over to you, Scott. Love to hear.
Thanks. Alrighty, let me try and share my screen. Oops. Alrighty, how do I share my screen there? First, technical problem first. Here we go. Done. So, thanks for the introduction, Jennifer. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about plastics. As you know, I've had several conversations. I do believe that I'm more of the traditional, I'm not your stock standard, environmentally friendly business. I'm a local manufacturer that's seen an opportunity, and I'm trying to transition away from plastic and into a more sustainable product. So I appreciate the opportunity. Now, so if we start with who am I? Like Jennifer said, I've been in plastics for a long time, about 15 years. 15 years ago, I took over a business called Peak Fresh. Now, at the time, I knew nothing about plastics. However, I found this company that was making a plastic product, and when you used it to store fruit and vegetables, the fruit and vegetables would live longer. So I didn't see it as such as a plastic product, or even saying that 15 years ago, it didn't really matter. It wasn't in the forefront of everyone's mind. But to me, it was a cool product that stopped food waste, and I thought that was pretty cool. So by using the product, people or farmers in Australia or all around the world they pack their fruit and vegetables and they export it. So that's how I started working with Peak Fresh, and then how I've ended up here is kind of just a series of events and luck. So in around 2012, we were outsourcing manufacturing, and it was proving really hard because we couldn't get our manufacturer to care about our product as much as we did. So order times were taking longer, we're getting quality problems, we'd have to sit in the queue and wait for products. So it was very opportunistic that a small company came up to Southern Adelaide and they were making plastic bags. So without any manufacturing knowledge, we thought we would buy it and make our own. So we took over the business, and it was a very, very steep learning curve. So even though we were selling a plastic product, we knew absolutely nothing about what went into it. We thought it was a single ingredient. We didn't realise it was multiple ingredients. We thought it was something magical where you just put it into a machine and it comes out. So there was a really big learning curve. But somehow we survived, and we were manufacturing Peak Fresh for ourselves, and it was going really well. And we were also manufacturing your traditional plastics, just your standard bread bags, ice bags, garbage bags, just bags. And we were happily just plodding along and doing our thing, and the business was growing, and there was a real flavour for local manufacturing because of the speed. So we were the fastest around, and we're still the fastest, but the turnaround times and the service that customers got, it was allowing our business to grow. Now, it wasn't, I'll be very honest, it wasn't probably until about 2017 when plastics for me started to hit the headlines. I think it was 2017 when you started to see pictures of birds and whales and turtles, and they were being killed by a plastic in the environment, or a turtle with a straw stuck in it. And so it was then that the plastic really started to hit the headlines. And my initial interest in transition, it was a business decision. It's to be honest with
Scott, do you mind if I interrupt you briefly? Your audio is playing up, but I don't suppose you could hardwire.
I could do what, sorry?
Hardwire. Oh, that's better. Wherever you are, don't move from there.
I think I just came a bit closer, maybe.
Just started dipping.
How about if I come closer? Is that better?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So yeah, so it was 2017 when plastics hit the headlines, and we started looking at other alternatives. But before that, really, and then friends, big plastics, and I can really and when we started there was an opportunity there. There were products being sold, but minimal amount. The quality of the products was poor. Quality of the material was poor. So there was an opportunity to try and so we set about looking, and then we were lucky enough to come across a company called BioBags. Now, BioBags, they're probably the original plastics company that transitioned into compostable. They did it about 15 years ago, and they're a world leader on compostable. So they were a really good company to look at, and they were selling some product in Australia, but it was all imported. So what I did was what any little tiny business in Adelaide would do, and I emailed them and asked, can I manufacture for them locally? And I was surprised enough, but they actually responded and said, let's have a meeting. And so then before I knew it, I was off an island off Estonia looking at a really large plastics factory. Now, most plastics factories look really similar, and this one was the same. However, they were manufacturing 100% compostable, and heaps of it. So it was really good to see that a business had made the transition, and that if they were doing it, then I thought there was an opportunity to do it in Australia, and that it would be sustainable. So luckily enough for me, we agreed to set up a joint venture in Australia. We have BioBags Australia, which is the company I represent. But then we also have my other company, Peak Fresh, which is the manufacturing company. So now, as a result of that joint venture, we've got about 20 staff in manufacturing. We're continuing to grow and invest, and it's growing really well. And we're slowly making the transition from traditional plastics into compostable. Now, I do have to mention that it was really the South Australian government that gave me some funding to start this project, because for a small business, if you tell them that they need to go and spend $1 million on equipment and hope that your intuition is going to work, the risk and the leap was too big. So we were really lucky to have a progressive government who thought, yep, we're going to invest in this technology and we'll see what happens. So that started BioBags. Now, I'll be honest, we do still make plastic. When I started the project 2 years ago, we were 99% plastic. This year will probably be about 95% compostable. So the compostable is a product in great demand and it's surging. So it's good. It's good for us. Now, being a plastics manufacturer, I don't have an issue with plastic. However, we need to be realistic about what it is and what it does. So the scariest stat that I've heard from anyone, and there's figures all over the place, is that any piece of plastic that we've ever made, unless we've burnt it, it's still around. So it's a crazy statistic, and it is built more around that we've only been making it for around 100 years, but it takes 1,000 years to degrade. So in saying that, I do understand that there is still a place for plastic. However, that place is reducing rapidly. And with a lack of infrastructure that we have to capture that plastic and recycle it, I believe it needs to reduce even faster. So you see there that currently 9% is recycled. And even though there's a massive uptake in recycling, we're still continuing to get more and more plastic into the environment because we don't have the infrastructure. So that leads us to compostables. Just compostable 101 for me is what is it? It's basically any material that will break down into carbon dioxide, water, and biomass. Really important in Australia that it has to have certification, because there's a lot of competing products out in the market that they will have all sorts of crazy terms. So you can get plastic made from sugar, or you can get magical plastic that will break down in a landfill. But these things, they're not certified. So we spend a lot of time trying to educate people on what certification is, what it means, and what to look for. Because in addition to trying to sell our product, we're also trying to educate the market on what products are out there and what they mean, which is great. And it's a service I think that ekko.world do really well. So we're happy with that. When we talk about why compostable, the thing for us is we don't want microplastics or toxic residue. So the microplastics, they're a growing problem, and they're a problem that until the last few years we hadn't really seen them yet. They're everywhere. We're finding them in polar ice caps. So I believe that using a compostable product, we're basically getting an opportunity for a better outcome. Now, what I mean by that is multiple things. So we want you to use compostable in it to capture organics, and I'll touch on that in a little bit about why we value the organics so much. But also, if a compostable bag does enter the environment, it's going to be a better environmental outcome. It's going to compost. Now, it might take a little bit longer than it would in a compost, but it is going to compost. And the reason why we like that is because the plastics that people are finding in the environment, if we're only recycling such a small percentage, they're getting into the environment, whether we like it or not. They are getting there. The compostable bag allows you to divert food waste from landfill. So we spend a lot of time and energy trying to educate people on the value of food waste. So yes, we want to reduce food waste. However, to us, that food waste is an organic resource. So whatever's left after we've tried to minimize it, we want to capture that. The idea that we're taking an organic material that is so valuable and so full of nutrients and putting it into landfill, it doesn't sit well with us. So that's why we align with Compostable, and we think that it's got a really important part to play in the circular economy. So we spend a lot of time competing with compostable versus polyethylene, but we see the compostable films as an enabler of the circular economy. So it's capturing organics for us. So just on that in regards to, is the product available overseas? Yep. Pretty much you can buy these products anywhere in the world now, which is great. It really, the compostable market is growing rapidly, despite competing with people. It is a growing market. So I'll come back to the questions in a minute, sorry. Yeah, so biobags, and what do we do? For us, it's pretty simple. We make plastic alternatives. So originally, compostable films, you'll see them everywhere. They're the green bags just to collect your scraps. But now, they're a legitimate plastic alternative. So I would say the majority of products that you can make out of a polyethylene film, you're pretty close to being able to make it compostable. So we make freezer bags, we make clear bags, we make mulch film. There's an enormous array of products that we can make. So it's great. So here's an example of a product we made. So this is just a cucumber wrap. I know people don't like wrapping cucumbers, but there is a function in it. But the beauty of it is, you're wrapping a cucumber in compostable film, it's going to last 3 times longer. And even so much as that little bit of the end of the cucumber that you initially cut off that has plastic on it, well, we're avoiding contamination of the green waste by having it compostable. Just this morning, we were a finalist in the packaging awards. So it is being picked up by mainstream companies, and it's really raising its profile. So same again, we make niche plastic. So we make a tube for coffee knot liners. Now, we completely understand that you don't really need one for the coffee tube. However, by using it in a coffee tube, and we've proven this with the Adelaide airport, by using it in a coffee tube, the amount of coffee grinds that they get into their organics versus into their landfill bill goes up exponentially. And it's a really small and simple example that we're just trying to capture organics, and we're trying to make it easier for people. So when I do say to Jennifer that we're not that traditional, we're a traditional business, that it's for reasons like that we see ourselves as more of a service provider. So there's a whole heap of amazing people that want to do better, and we're just enabling that by coming up with products that suit them. So it's great. Oops. This is one of my favourite products because it's such a simple product. So around Australia, there's millions of kilometres of plastic mulch film used every year. And at the end of that, the farmer is going to hopefully pick it up. But the challenge they have is if you're farming in Broome, there's no plastic recycling near you. So at the moment, their choices are they either bury it or burn it. Now, by using a compostable product, they can just plough it straight back into the field and then start again. Now, this is where I see the opportunity for compostables, because it's easier for us to sell a product that doesn't require the behaviour change. And that's why that's one of my favourite products, because it's such a simple product. And they don't have to change their behaviours. They don't have to worry about what they're doing. They can concentrate on their core business, yet still make a environmental difference. And so it's these environmental changes and these small behavioural changes which allows us to put produce rolls into supermarkets. Now, I understand it's only a small change, but our major retailers would use approximately 6 billion of these bags a year. Now, if we just ignore the amount of plastic 6 billion bags is, and look at the positives, by using a compostable bag in the fruit and veg section, it's been proven that the amount of organics collected grows by about 300%. So it's a huge amount of organics that are being diverted away from landfill. And to us, that's the bigger benefit. It's, yes, you're not using the 6 billion bags that are made out of fossil fuel and it's a finite resource, but you're capturing so much organics. And the amount of energy that goes into growing and manufacturing those organics, it needs to be respected and it needs to be valued, which is why we love capturing it. So this is one of our main campaigns. It's about FOGO. So it's food organics, green organics. Ideally, we believe that every council in Australia should be doing FOGO. It's going to get organics out of landfill. So and the statistics are really scary, because we have over 500 councils and less than 100 do FOGO. So over 80% of those councils are putting their organics straight into landfill. Now that landfill, so you see there around 20 million tonnes of organics is landfilled annually. Now just 10 million of that is actually food organics. So, and when we put it in landfill, not only are we wasting it, but we're then producing methane, which so why do we do it? As I said earlier, I see ourselves as more of a service provider. So we kind of stumbled into BioBags, but what I love about it is some really cool people. So the cucumber wrap, that wasn't our idea. That's just a group of people in Newcastle that have got together, and I think they've made up just like 30 collection hubs. So they're taking their own time to set up these hubs, and they're collecting food waste and they're composting it, and they're teaching the schools how to compost, and they're using that compost for the schools to grow vegetables. So there's some really cool people doing some cool stuff. And we're really lucky that we get to be a service provider to them, because it's exciting. Yes, manufacturing is fun, but it's also really hard work. But having so many chemicals, really amazing energy, you have to get, it rubs off on you. You cannot not be excited about people around us. And that's proven even by, it's like, we're having a webinar today to talk about some of these products, and it's those cool people that are driving this change. So that makes it a lot of fun. It is exciting to be leading the transition. So since we started manufacturing in Australia, I think later this year we'll probably hit around 100 million bags that we've made alone. So it's a transition that's happening rapidly. And then what we've learned about starting this project is that sort of yeah.
That last bit, the sound's been great for a little while, but that last slide we lost.
Oh, that was my best slide.
No, no, the front end was fine. It was really just the last few sentences.
So the final sentence was that we're on track to do 100 million bags locally since starting this project. It's exciting for us to be leading a transition away from polyethylene, and we're educating people on sort of trying to put a value onto organics, which is really what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to this is my last slide because this is really important to us, because the people that are aiming are the ones doing incremental change. So yes, it's great that there's the Gretas of this world that are making massive, massive differences. But we're trying to get the other billion people to do something small, because we feel that will add up. So now Q&A. Right. So that's that one. So Karen's asked, are they compostable in home or commercial? So depending on the product, so at a minimum, all of our products are certified industrial. We do have a large amount that are certified home. So in reality, the difference between them with our product is just thickness. So our thicker bags, they need to go to industrial because they need higher temperature. And it's not so much for the temperature, it's just for the speed at which they go. For them to be certified home, they have to be gone within 6 months at a fairly low temperature. So it does depend on the product. But yeah. So the biggest challenge for getting into supermarkets, that's been really interesting. So supermarkets, I don't necessarily feel have been on board. However, if you look at the products they're starting to stock, and their behaviours and the messaging they're starting to say, what's been really good is they have no choice. Spend more on a compostable bag versus a plastic bag. They're getting so much feedback from their customers that so that's been exciting. Has my speaker stopped working?
No, Scott, I just dropped your screen sharing in the hope that it helped your sound.
Thought it was something I said.
It was actually because you were just answering that question, and what you're saying is so important. The point I think you're headed towards this conversation about the grassroots argument. But so if
Yep.
you mind starting it again, because it was starting to garble a bit. But
All right.
you were saying, not what you were saying?
So the in regards to the challenges of getting into supermarkets, my point on that is yes, it's hard. They really don't want to do it. However, what's really exciting is it's consumer led, so they don't get a choice. They're getting so much feedback from their customers that they have to provide options. So that's what's been really exciting, because it means as a business we can educate consumers on what to look for and what to avoid, and they're doing, as what I was saying before about these cool people, they're doing the work. They're going to the supermarket saying, you need to do better and you need to not sell degradable plastic because it does this. So there's like a massive movement of people that are taking it upon themselves to educate supermarkets. So what does industrial compost mean? So I touched on it briefly before. Industrial compost, it's a certification. So it's a minimum set of requirements that says that if my product is certified, it has to be gone within 3 months in an industrial compost. So there's Australian standards to test for it. So it's a combination of, does it contain heavy metals? Is it toxic to worms? What heat will it degrade at? So that's basically what the standard means. Are there different grades? So there's different grades of material, but at the end of the day, there's only 2 certifications, either home or industrial. So no matter what the grade of material is, it has to be certified. The next one that says South Australia is eco and good on you, I'll take that as thanks. Is there a way to tell if they're different? Unfortunately not, but then fortunately not also, because the product, traditionally compostable, is really soft and a bit stretchy. So yeah, it was a positive because you could tell the difference, but it was also a negative because people didn't like it. They didn't like the feel. They didn't like how it looked. Whereas now the compostable products are coming along so fast that we can make a perfectly clear bag that you can use to wrap a newspaper. And it visually looks the same, which is why the certification is really important. How much film is produced in Australia, compostable film? So compostable films are hard. It's hard to get the exact number on. We believe that there'd be around 600 or 700 tonne produced a year, of which we would be the lion's share. So it's great. Is there a collection for biobags to separate at source and divert? So the biobags, I think if I'm understanding that correctly, so in regards to the biobags, the beauty of the biobag is there is no separation. So when it gets to a composter, it's seen as an organic resource, the same as banana skin would. So yeah. How does a consumer ensure it gets to an industrial composter? The best way to ensure that it gets there is to speak to your council about FOGO, because it's not just about the compostable bag. It's about the kitchen waste. It's about the scraps. It's about collecting those millions of tons and avoiding landfill. So multiple reasons again, is like collecting the organic resources, farming that back into land, avoiding plastic. Yeah, there's so many reasons and so many benefits for getting that compostable bags to collect organics. Is it possible to use the same materials for PPE in health work? That's a good question. So technically it's possible. However, that's a massive question. And it does depend on what properties they're looking for. So if they're talking about a plastic apron, absolutely. There's no reason why that couldn't be compostable. If they're talking about the masks, then yeah, it depends on the structure and what they're looking for. But yeah, it's getting there. Evelyn asked about the biggest pushback from councils. So biggest pushback with the way, for those who haven't seen, we sell compostable bags and we provide it in kind of a ventilated caddy, which is a collection system. The ventilated caddy is designed to let air through, so that way the kitchen scraps, they dehydrate, so you're not throwing out so much waste and so much water, and they reduce smell. So there's some pushback on that because there's a perception that I don't want kitchen scraps on my kitchen top. But one of the amazing things that's happened out of the last few years is with China banning our waste, our landfill levies are going up. So the councils can actually save money by diverting organics, because organics are probably the heaviest thing in their landfill bin at the moment. So that's been a big change for us, and it's really exciting. So Emma Bates, is there a direct distinguish between a regular plastic bag? Once again, it's a little bit tricky. And I understand that obviously your council's saying only council branded bags. So if we look at the root cause of that comes back to so many cheeky products. I'll be nice and say cheeky, but being mislabeled and not being what they say they are. They're labelled biodegradable or degradable, and so unfortunately, a lot of councils they're going and saying, "Oh, here we'll custom brand it this colour or with this printing," and that's great, but it still doesn't stop the regular plastic bag from being misleading. So hopefully that'll slowly change. What percentage of plastics are now compostable? Sheesh. I would not have a clue. What percentage could we make compostable? I'd have to say about 90%. And then I love the question on, can you talk about biodegradable plastic? So biodegradable, in Europe, biodegradable is the word they use for compostable. So that's fine. In Australia, the word biodegradable has no meaning. So it means that I could make a plastic bag and I could label it biodegradable, because there's no standards, there's no measurement, there's no way of disproving it. So the ACCC openly say not to label anything biodegradable because it's misleading. However, out of all the competitors we have, the word biodegradable would be the one that causes the most trouble. So people are going to the supermarkets and they're buying biodegradable or degradable plastics, which makes a plastic bag non-recyclable, but then it also speeds up the microplastic problem. So biodegradable is a massive problem for us. My thoughts on a compostable disposable baby nappy. I think that's a great solution, especially if we have the infrastructure to collect it. So they've got to go to industrial, obviously. And if it is truly 100% compostable. So if 90% is compostable and it has plastic tape, or if it has the elastic in it that's not compostable, then that unfortunately ruins the organic stream, and it makes it harder for a lot of people to get products in, because then the industrial composters, they'll say no more, we're not taking it. can chickens eat fucking cucumbers? I'd hope they don't. So the easiest way to understand a compostable film. So we do need to understand it is made like a chemical process. So it's not really designed to be a food source. However, where it differs from normal plastic is if you imagine that normal plastic would be like hardwood. It's really dense fibers and really thick. A hardwood, termites can't eat hardwood necessarily because they can't get into it and there's no space and no air and no light gets in. Whereas if you were to look under a compostable bag, it's like softwood, so the fibers are looser, which is why organisms can get in. So organisms can get into it, light can get into it, oxygen can get into it. But as a food source for chickens, no. So I think that's it. I think I've answered them all, Jennifer.
Hello there. Actually, I wanted to know about those chickens as well, which is a bit embarrassing. Well, that's a really good explanation, the hardwood, softwood. Thank you. I guess what I was thinking more was when you made the comment, because I have chickens, well, not chickens, they're hens. When you made that comment about the last bit of the cucumber,
yep.
I say, obviously, if you have animals, pigs, or you're feeding your stuff too, would it harm them? I suppose. Maybe you've answered it. Just don't do it.
Yeah, no, don't do it because so at the end of the day, if there's organisms, it will break down. However, you don't want to enter in your chicken's stomach and them having to process it. No, it's a funny story as it is. You just don't. The benefit of having that little bit of the cucumber cut off and being compostable is that little piece there simply avoids plastic entering the compost.
Yeah, of course, of course. One other follow-up too, just with reference to the question on biodegradable.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, so in Australia, biodegradable doesn't mean compostable, does it? It could break down, but essentially it could also break down into smaller pieces of plastic, correct?
It's just the key thing is there's no standard to it. So with any product, if there's no standard to it, there's no way to measure it, there's no way to prove it, there's no way to validate it. So because biodegradable isn't backed up by a standard, it basically means you can put it on anything, and whether it lasts 100 years or 200 years, it still technically might biodegrade.
Yes, but is the point that it breaks down potentially into smaller pieces of plastic as opposed to something that's compostable, or is that a wrong assumption?
Well, that's one risk, but the point is more that we don't know what it is.
Right. Okay.
So degradable, there's a standard, and degradable will break down into microplastics. Biodegradable, because it's not used as part of a standard, it means that you can use it indiscriminately on almost anything.
Right. Okay. And on that subject, I mean, you live pretty much, your business lives among traditional businesses.
Yep.
So how do you go with those challenges? I assume you spend half your life biting your tongue, especially as you probably know, excuse me, but how far the bullshit meter is turned up.
I think you know me well enough that biting my tongue has not been one of my problems.
No, but
no. So, yes, it's frustrating, and you get sick and tired of it. And there's somebody sent me an article yesterday of this beautiful new product that's landfill biodegradable, and yes, it annoys you. However, my only option is to continue educating and continue discussing it. Because that's the only way, because I can't call them all out. So the more people that we can educate, then they'll call them out and say that their time's limited. The consumer is getting so environmentally aware that 2 years ago, degradable was a good plastic. Now in South Australia, within the next 6 months, degradable plastic will be banned.
Right. Okay.
And that's a 2 year. That's 2 years, which is a rapid timescale for a product to be widely acceptable and then banned. And that's actually legislation. So that's on the flip side of the frustrating bit is the really exciting bit that we can encourage change without spending time arguing with people. It's great.
Yeah, it come from the positive. I may have missed it, but there was a question about where people could go to read, watch, and consume to understand more.
There's millions of places. We have great blogs that we try to be really open and honest about what our products do and what they don't do. Our raw ingredient comes from Italy. They have some amazing material that we often share. So they're really talking about the circular economy and the bioeconomy, and so they're an awesome resource. So there's heaps of them. I'd probably suggest BioBag's blog to start with as a great source.
Good man. I was just trying to see whether Stephanie was still around too, because that question about compostable, disposable baby nappies,
Yep.
that sounds like it may actually be solved in part by some of her contacts that have built her bra.
Absolutely. So I've seen some nappies that are almost compostable.
Right. Yes.
But yeah, absolutely. That's probably be a really good opportunity for her.
Yeah, we'll take it up with her because that's a really important point. The other one I want to just check in with you on is, you said a few times actually that the bags capture more organics. So I think you were talking about the coffee grinds, which in the not but also in fruit and vegetables as well. So it's one thing to when you say capture organics, is that because the stuff just gets left in the bag and then gets disposed of? I guess my question is, does it still end up, are you saying to landfill, or are you saying it actually gets captured and ends up?
So the idea is, what we're trying to do is make that behavioural change easy. The coffee knock, if you can capture it into a green bag, and the green bag is clearly identified, and then it makes it really easy for people to make that behaviour change and capture that into organics.
Yes.
So
yeah.
we want it, we're trying to capture it to use it. So it's so valuable. I think it takes about 2,000 years to make 10 centimetres of topsoil. So if we're chucking out 10 million tonnes or 20 million tonnes of organics into landfill, it's crazy.
Yeah, sure. So one of the key messages I'm getting from that is it's about facilitating an opportunity, which is your service argument, I guess. Don't stress so much about giving the solution, create the environment that facilitates the use of the product.
Yeah, with any of this, with any behaviour change, you can get absolute paralysis. So
Sure.
my council doesn't take organics, so there's no point in me collecting them. Well, how about you capture organics and you compost them, so that's an improvement on not collecting them. Because the infrastructure will come. It is moving slowly around Australia, but as I was mentioning before about China, the really good thing about China not taking our waste is the commercial viability of composting and collection of compost is just growing massively.
Yeah, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise.
No chance.
Yeah, that's a very good point. On that too, I must say, I had never thought twice about the kilometres and kilometres of plastic ag waste.
Yep.
What's the story there? So literally at the moment, how many kilometres did you say?
It's millions.
And
Where this year we're servicing one of the smaller melon growers in Broome, and he's approximately 150 kilometres. And
one guy.
But this is one small grower.
Okay, right.
If you, when you're driving and you see kilometres and kilometres of black plastic, yeah.
That's going to end up somewhere. So, so that's a mass sale opportunity, is it? It's essentially for you.
Yep.
And what's the take up been like the literal take up?
It's slow. Anything to do with agriculture is generally a slow sales cycle. Farmers would generally like to do a 2 or 3 year sales cycle because they've been doing what they've been doing for a long time. So they're not going to change year one. So year one, they try, year two, they try, year three, they buy.
Right. So even though it must be easier for them though to simply plough it back into the ground.
It is easier, but there's still risk in the unknown for them. Right. So farmers do need to try. They won't change to a new fertiliser or something else without trying it, and which completely understand.
Yeah, okay. And just on one other thing on that, is it does it add value? So what kind of nutrient value is it any in terms of where it's in an ag situation, because these are bioplastics, aren't they, essentially? But is there any soil nutrient value in an ag situation?
So soil nutrient would be minimal. However, you are actually putting a small amount of carbon back into the soil.
Of course, yeah.
So, but when you talk over a square metre, the volume of carbon, it is minuscule. But it's more for us. It's more that you're not taking virgin material from crude oil, using it for 1 year and burning it.
Yeah.
So it's, to us, the real value is in avoiding the traditional product.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've got my head around that. And just what's the in terms of the rollout, do you have a view? I mean, I clearly have some ambitions. I think this is really more for people who are taking on directly, taking on more traditional products, particularly in the plastic space. Do you have a horizon in terms of what your ambitions are that you can share?
Yep. Yes, I would like within the next 3 years, every supermarket in Australia to only use compostable produce bags.
In the next 3 years?
Yeah.
And your chances?
I would say 100%.
Within 3 years?
Absolutely, it's moving so quickly, and they really have to. So South Australia will make that move soon. We're talking early next year, and you see the number of councils that are introducing food organics to try and reduce their landfill bills is growing rapidly. So then the argument for there isn't enough infrastructure diminishes. Very shortly, we'll release a new clear bag that's home compostable. So then their argument for clarity reduces. So it's being consumer-led, and they're running out of excuses. So it will happen.
Wow. So you think we're on the uptick, basically?
Absolutely. Yeah. Massively.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Wow. That's amazing, actually. That's really heartening. I think that's amongst the best news I've heard. All right. I see Chrissy, by the way, has just turned up. She's from a little further west than you. Let me see if I can't unmute her and let her in. Mute. There she is.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So did you catch any of Scott's presentation? Because I know you've been busy cooking.
I did a little bit earlier. I'm having a little bit of audio issues, actually. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, that's good. Awesome. I caught a little bit earlier. It's awesome work. I love that there are so many people out there doing such amazing things. So well done, Scott.
Thanks.
Yeah, so Chrissy, Scott, one thing you both share is getting chemicals out of our everyday lives. So just for context here, Scott, or actually just before we do move to Chrissy, bin liners, do you sell them? Do you sell you sell home bin liners, don't you? So just residentially, you sell bin liners, and what else?
We sell bin liners, freezer bags, Ziploc bags for sandwiches. I think that's about it.
Right. And I have to ask the obvious question before we let you go, which is around compostability. And the same question as the bra. Do these things dissolve if you don't pay attention to them, or you don't keep them at a certain temperature, etc.?
Yes.
They do.
Yes.
Okay.
So when the word dissolve, maybe not dissolve. However, if they don't like sunlight, so don't store them in the sun. If they will last in your kitchen cupboard for around 18 months, which is the beauty of making them in Australia. They'll last longer. However, after that, they will start to mechanically break down.
So what if you live in one of the warmer states?
Yeah, it's fine.
Same. So if there isn't a faster breakdown in, say, the outback versus...
No, if they're in their kitchen cupboard, they'll be fine.
Yeah, okay. It's a very common concern. I know with the packaging companies, the shipping plastic shipping companies, a lot of them do say to store it in specific places. Perhaps it's a different plastic. Don't know, depends. Okay. So just in wrapping, what are the main points, really? Because I just really like to tackle this point of, there's the plastic itself, really. Physically, the decisions you've made about pursuing compostable plastics. But I think the other big thing there's two other things I've really got out of this today that I think are important. One is grassroots change. So there's grassroots change. And the other, I think, for businesses that are watching is so much about, you don't necessarily have to go around beating people over the head with your thing. It's around finding ways to facilitate it, isn't it?
Change. So for me, the main point is valuing organics, and let's stop wasting it, and just incremental change. So provide a service that people can make small changes.
Yeah, rather than a big step, one thing at a time.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's certainly great to hear you think there's a 3-year horizon. That's made my day. That's amazing. I hope you've got the UN and the global SDGs tracking in.
We're on the SDGs, don't worry.
Yeah, of course. Oh, of course you are. Absolutely. Chrissy, before we let Scott go, have you got anything you wanted to ask?
No, you did just say something before. Just about small steps is something that I'm sort of passionate about as well, is that if just making those little steps can amount to be something so huge if more people take it on board. So just think it's so cool that so many of us are on the same page with that.
Yeah, such a good point. Thanks, Chrissy. So we're going to wrap with Scott now. Thank you so much. That was fascinating. I know you think you're the most boring person on earth. You're not. You're making incredible changes, and that mindset is just so important. Particularly, you obviously have to live amongst, maybe you're smarter because you live amongst people who don't support what you're doing. You spend your life trying to persuade others to see things differently. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Jennifer. Thank you.
And hang around if you have it for